March 1945. The Rhine River crossing. While most Allied commanders were still drawing up cautious battle plans and, requesting more supplies, George S. Patton had already thrown a full division across Germany's last natural barrier, using wooden boats, and honestly, just pure audacity. When German High Command intercepted the radio traffic, their reaction wasn't anger. It was something closer to disbelief mixed with, dread. They'd spent 4 years learning how Americans fight. Methodical, predictable, overwhelming, but slow. Then Patton showed up and really just rewrote every assumption they'd made. The German military machine had built its entire defensive strategy around one core belief. American forces needed time. Time to build supply depots. Time to coordinate with British allies. Time to establish overwhelming material superiority before advancing. Their intelligence reports confirmed this pattern repeatedly throughout World War II. Then came the summer of 1944, and everything their generals thought they knew became, dangerously obsolete. Patton's Third Army didn't just move fast for an American force. It moved fast by any standard in military history. While German commanders expected the typical Allied advance of maybe 5 to 8 miles per day, Patton's tanks were covering 40, 50, sometimes 60 miles in a single day. His columns would smash through a defensive position at dawn and be 30 miles past it by lunch, leaving German reinforcements arriving to defend, just empty ground. If there was any moment when German generals thought they'd finally pinned down and neutralized Patton, it was the autumn of 1944 in Lorraine. The weather turned miserable. The terrain was a muddy nightmare. Fortified positions around Metz had held against attackers for over 1,000 years. Supply lines were stretched thin. This was where the American rampage would finally bog down into the kind of grinding attrition warfare that favored prepared defenders. Patton attacked anyway. Not with the careful, methodical siege warfare that Metz demanded, but with the same relentless aggression that had carried him across France. It was costly. It was brutal. His casualty rates climbed in ways that would have convinced other commanders to halt and regroup. But he kept the pressure on because he understood something crucial. The Germans were bleeding worse. Every day Patton kept attacking was a day German reserves got committed to Lorraine instead of defending more critical sectors. Every fortification his forces reduced was one less strong point available for the defence of Germany proper. He turned what should have been his operational defeat into a strategic victory by simply refusing to acknowledge that he was supposed to stop. German commanders watched in frustrated disbelief as this American general did everything wrong according to established military doctrine, and somehow made it work through sheer force of will and aggression. The Battle of the Bulge was supposed to be Germany's checkmate move. Hitler's generals had planned the offensive to exploit exactly the kind of rigid, slow-moving command structure they'd come to expect from the Allies. American units would need days to coordinate a response. British and American commanders would argue about priorities. The window for a devastating counterattack would stay open long enough to reach Antwerp and split the Allied armies. Then someone told Patton's Third Army to wheel 90 degrees north and relieve Bastogne. In winter, through terrible weather, across difficult terrain, while still engaged with German forces to their front. Military professionals considered it impossible. You can't disengage from active combat, rotate an entire army 90 degrees, and launch a major offensive in a matter of days. The logistics alone would take weeks to coordinate. Patton did it in 72 hours. When German High Command received reports that Third Army units were hitting their southern flank in strength just days after the offensive began, they initially dismissed it as faulty intelligence. It had to be small spoiling attacks, not Patton's main force. Nobody could move that fast. Then their defensive lines started collapsing and the horrible truth sank in. He'd done it again. This was the moment many German commanders realized they weren't fighting a conventional opponent. They were fighting someone who viewed their entire operational playbook as a list of things he could safely ignore. By March 1945, the Rhine River represented Germany's last major defensive barrier. Allied command planned an elaborate set-piece crossing for late March, massive artillery preparation, air support, engineering units building bridges, the full overwhelming power of modern combined arms warfare. Very professional, very thorough, very slow. Patton crossed on March 22nd, at night, without telling anyone, using assault boats and improvised rafts. Then he called Bradley and casually mentioned that the Third Army was already on the east bank, so maybe they could get some engineer support to build proper bridges when convenient. The psychological impact on German defenders was devastating. They'd prepared for the big coordinated assault they knew was coming. Instead, Patton was already behind them, and their carefully prepared positions were about to become encirclements. The man simply would not fight the battle they'd prepared for. Patton's relentless operational tempo in World War II proved something that military theorists still study: speed and aggression can substitute for overwhelming material superiority. His ability to keep German forces constantly off balance meant they never got to fight on their terms, with prepared positions and favourable odds. Every day Patton's forces spent racing across Europe was a day German commanders spent reacting instead of planning, defending instead of attacking, and desperately trying to figure out where he'd appear next. He turned the psychological dimension of warfare into a weapon as devastating as his tanks. The German generals who'd conquered most of Europe in 1940 learned a hard lesson in 1944 and 45. It doesn't matter how good your defensive plan is if your opponent simply moves too fast for that plan to matter. Patton didn't beat them with superior tactics or overwhelming force. He beat them by never ever giving them time to catch their breath. If you found this deep dive into World War II combat operations valuable, hit that subscribe button. Share this with anyone who appreciates real military history told without the usual boring textbook approach. We're building something special here at the Last Pacific War Chronicles. Real expertise, real stories, and the kind of insights you won't find anywhere else. Don't miss what's coming next.